From Alameda, California, the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network presents Flying High Over the Zone with the Zigzag Man.
I am back. You are flying high over the zone. From Alameda, California, I'm the Zigzag Man. A lot of people call me Ralph Tycho, my given name. And we're right over the bridge to San Francisco, right over the bay. And we're in the East Bay, down by the lagoon at the 420 studio. And I'm blessed. I have two terrific guests. One has already been in studio. He's in the can, as it were. He's not in the can, but the show is in the can. And that'll be the second episode. And the first episode, which is this one, will be, I'm going to attach both interviews, will be with one of my heroines. She's an activist, and more importantly to me, she's a marijuana activist. She's a peace activist. She's organizing as we speak to fight the bad guys at Crissy Field. They're no longer at Crissy Field. And that elongated introduction, I'm going to now introduce you to one of my new friends in the world, Joanna Arenstein. How are you?
Hi, Ralph. I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I tend to ramble a little bit, as you can see, but I'm really impressed by the work that you do. Let's start with Cannabis and an organization that you are now the director of. It's East Bay Canna. Is that how?
Close. East Bay Canna Community.
Canna Community. I
yes.
left out community, but
that's okay. We go by East Bay Canna for short.
Oh, okay. So that's where I was confused.
No problem.
And what was the organization's goal when they started? And you're not the first director. You recently took over. How did the organization get started? Did it coincide with legalization of marijuana, or did it precede that and campaign for the legalization of marijuana in California?
Yes, so the organization started about 2.5 years ago very informally, and it just organically happened. A group of about 8 people gathered on Lake Merritt as a way to just be in community. You know, these people are fighting so much every single day for legalization, and so we need to party as well. And so a group of 8 people gathered on Lake Merritt for just an afternoon Friday gathering, and it's now grown to about anywhere from 200 to 300 people on the first Friday of every month. And we are actually in the process of becoming a formal nonprofit. And so while we have had program coordinators before who were, kind of involved on a part-time level, I'm the very first executive director who will be working full-time and really bringing this to the next level and expanding our outreach.
That's terrific. I attended my first meeting with you guys last week, and my partner Tally Olson sends regards. She was there and got to meet you as well. I'll tell you what impressed me the most. Already you're giving back to the community. You have a program that maybe you can help clarify for me. You help folks who can't afford medical marijuana. They can't They have no way of going down there. They have no way of paying for it. What's that program about? And it's for seniors. And what's that about? Tell me.
Yes, so that's called our Compassion program, and it's actually for people of all ages, anybody 18 and older who has a valid medical recommendation for the use of cannabis for medical ailments. And so these are for individuals who have any ailment and who are low income or cannot, for whatever reason, get access to medicine. So what we do is we partner with any dispensary or product line, and they donate medicine to us. And I now have a leadership team of 3 people who generously volunteer their time to coordinate donations, make sure that these donations are recorded properly, and then are delivered to patients. And this is a very important component of giving back to the community. There are unfortunately so many people who are really struggling financially in the Bay Area. As you know, this is a very difficult place to live, difficult place to make ends meet, and adding on medical costs to that can really make life incredibly difficult. And so this is just a small way that we can alleviate some of that suffering. And more than anything, what I'm finding is that in addition to meds, this program is also giving people a real sense of community, which, as you know, they've studied that people who are ill and who are in community heal much faster than those who aren't. So I see this program as twofold in bringing actual meds, but bringing them community as well.
Appropriately named compassion, a word we don't hear much.
That's true.
Nowadays. And nice, real nice. Joanna, I'm old enough to remember when marijuana wasn't a business, when people would share like you guys are doing in your Compassion program. And it's what brought community together back then. And it's been like, for me, it's been 40 years of being a wake and baker and dreaming of the day when not only medical marijuana, which has been around for 10 years in California, we're progressives. If you're listening out of state, sorry for you on a lot of levels. First of all, our medical marijuana program serves the people rather than all the people, not just the people who are afflicted with a disease that falls under the category. Some states you have to have polio and muscular dystrophy on the same Thursday to get a card. Here, you can get a card for the right reasons in California. Mm-hmm. For instance, me, personally, I got a medical marijuana card because I suffer from floating anxiety and sleeplessness. Now, you could say, well, it's floating anxiety. What's that? Well, floating anxiety is very, very important to mental health. And the medical program in California doesn't only cover physical sickness and injury. It covers mental injury and sickness. And now, since last November, marijuana is legal recreationally. We're going through a transition period where the individual cities are going to license vendors and distributors and growers and all of these things. Big change going on. And it's exciting for me to see. You're a part of it. How did you become an activist? Who raised you, young lady?
My parents raised me. I definitely learned my activism from my parents. My earliest memory of their activism was I lived on a street corner that had a two-way stop. And in my neighborhood were lots of families, lots of kids running around, and there were constantly accidents on this two-way stop. And so my parents it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it really influenced me. My parents led the charge, got the news involved, and petitioned the city to make that intersection a four-way stop. And that left a huge impression on me because it showed me that, there is no magical somebody, like, oh, somebody should do something about that. Like, my parents showed me that we are that somebody. And, I also watched them get involved in just, they were very locally active. They worked on mayor campaigns. They worked on school board levies. And even, unfortunately my brother was, I don't know how to put this nicely. There's no way to put it, but, one of our neighbors called my brother, who was 6 years old at the time, a kike. And so I realize that not everybody knows what that means, but that's a slur for Jews. I was telling this story earlier today, and people are like, "What's that?" And I watched both of my parents just face that Nazi head on. And so they taught me that you go straight into that snake pit. You do not back down. And so my parents were my role models and continue to be role models. They've been making phone calls to state legislators, following Trump's election, and I really admire the work that they do. They really set that example for me, and I continue to follow that to this day.
Oh, nice. They're to be commended, and you're to be commended for picking up on it. Very cool. What was your first campaign? What was your first issue that you came to grips with?
Let's see. Probably pro-choice. When I was probably 15 or 16, I started volunteering at NARAL and just was like stuffing envelopes. And I remember, even when I was probably 16 or 17, I forget what national holiday it was, but my dad, he knew I was going down to the office to stuff envelopes and volunteer, and he was like, could you just stay home today because I know that it's normally on these days, like these weird holidays, like it was like a Columbus Day or Veterans or something. He's like, that's when people will bomb those clinics and those offices. And I honestly can't remember if I stayed home or not. I probably did. My dad's a very reasonable man, and so when, the few times he did make requests, I would often honor them. And I was also involved in, when I was in college, a lot of funding for higher education was being cut, so I would, travel. When I was going to school out in Ohio, I traveled to the Capitol to protest for more funding for education. I did some volunteer work for the Obama campaign, and I really lost a lot of faith in our government after the 2000 election when the Supreme Court decided not to recount the votes in Florida. I was a political science major at the time, and I really lost a lot of faith. But it was, and even though I volunteered for Barack Obama, I did phone banking, but nothing too substantial. But Bernie Sanders really relit my fire last year, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years at this point, and I got heavily involved. I actually co-founded a group called Bay Area Social Events for Bernie. And this was a group, we created events for people to come to. We registered voters. We held workshops teaching people how to hold successful events. And I met a ton of just completely passionate, compassionate, activated people within the Bernie community who continue their activism. And that's how I am now involved with the protest happening tomorrow now at Alamo Square. As you know, they have, the Nazis have canceled their rally in Crissy Field and are moving it to Alamo Square. Yes.
Gotten out? Is that, I tuned into the news and it wasn't all over the news this evening, or at least I missed it. Very interesting. you mentioned that
Can't hear you.
guns.
There.
What's the idea in Contra Costa? Is it different than San Francisco? Are they permitting guns? What you said something about that to me.
Yeah. So can you repeat the question because the phone line cut out for a moment there.
They chose to protest in Alamo Square. Why? What precipitated that? First of all.
Yes, so they canceled the Chrissy Field rally, and then they changed their event to.
Or did they cancel?
They canceled. The Patriot Prayer organizer at about 3:00 this afternoon canceled the Chrissy Field rally. However, he moved it to Alamo Square and is now calling it a press conference. And from what we could gather, I've been trying to gather information. The mayor's office is trying to gather information. The police department is trying to gather information. While it hasn't been confirmed, all we can gather is that they were worried for their security, not that all of these protests are all planning to be nonviolent. All we're doing is just showing up and saying, hey, we disagree with you. There is a vocal opposition. Nobody was threatening violence. However, there were going to be so many people showing up, scared them off. We are concerned, though, because on government land, which Chrissy Field is, you are not, from what I understand, you are not allowed to carry weapons. However, in Alamo Square, they are allowed to carry weapons. And so I've been calling the mayor's office. I've been on the phone with.
Whoops. Did I lose you?
They can temporarily revoke a concealed carry permit. However, the only one who's able to revoke that is the mayor. This announcement was made at 3:00, so we were able to get some phone calls into the mayor's office. But when I called back again at 5,
talk about the mayor of Alamo.
No, the mayor of San Francisco. Alamo Square is within San Francisco. So we had been calling the mayor's office, San Francisco, yeah. So it's Alamo Square. That's okay.
Confused. There's an Alamo, a city of Alamo, in Contra Costa, and I thought we were talking about them moving from San Francisco to that small city in Alamo, which is an Alamo Square as well. There's a park in San Francisco called Alamo Square, I am now assuming, and they've moved there. Okay.
They've moved there, yes.
So is the idea to get the word out to all the folks trying to come down to protest now go to Alamo Square? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yes. That is the plan. They move, we move. And what I think is happening, and from what I'm guessing, I'm on a lot of different text threads with different organizers of different rallies, and we're all trying to figure out what are they trying to confuse us? Are they trying to divide us? Are they still going to show up at Chrissy Field? And then that means that we're going to be split between Alamo Square and Chrissy Field. We're trying to figure out their angle. Unfortunately, we're also concerned that their angle is changing locations so that they can have weapons. We're not certain of that, and we still don't know what the mayor will decide, if he will decide to temporarily revoke concealed carry permit. But no matter what, we plan on being there. No official announcements from different groups have been made yet, but from what I can gather from the different discussions is that we plan to be there. We plan to be peaceful. Some of us are even planning to be silent as not to disrupt their press conference so that they can express themselves and have freedom of speech, but we think it's very important that we at least have a presence there. So they can move all around the city. We're coming with them. So until this is fully canceled and they will have no gathering, will we call off our rally. But until that point, they can call it a rally, they can call it a protest, they can call it a family reunion. We'll still be there.
Joanna, if the press didn't cover them, would they exist?
So that's a really good question. I was talking to a friend about this, who said, if a Nazi screams in a field, does he exist? And yes, they do, because As you know, with social media and with all sorts of different, smaller radio stations, smaller newspapers, they still will be covered. And it actually emboldens these guys when they show up unopposed, which is why, there's a lot of different ways that people are resisting this event tomorrow. Some are having dance parties in Dolores Park. Some are having concerts at the Civic Center. While those are all well and good, that really doesn't help our cause. That's not really resistance, and I'm sure that a lot of people are not going to be happy with me saying that. It's not people having a dance party in Dolores Park miles from the protest miles from the rally that caused the rally to be canceled. It was the fact that people were showing up to really face off with these Nazis, going to the exact place that they were going. And that's what made them change their mind. And so, yes, they still will exist even if the media doesn't show up. I believe that we have to have an equally loud voice to show them that there is opposition. And unfortunately, what's happening and what I've been following on the news is that a lot of people are joining these white supremacist rallies because they're lonely and they want a group to belong to. And so they see these people organizing online and they see this as kind of like a gang to join. And the second that they see that there's people in their faces and opposing them, I mean, I don't know if you saw that video, but there was a video of a guy in Charlottesville who literally took off his shirt. They were all wearing khakis and polos. He saw that there was opposition and he stripped down and he was like, I'm not a white supremacist. I'm not all about white power. I was just joking. And so when you show up, we're scaring these people.
All cuckoos by definition. So there's all different kinds of cuckoos. I don't have much sympathy. I'm a Jew myself. My father escaped the Holocaust. My grandmother was killed.
My God.
I had uncles killed. One uncle and his family and cousins killed. I was not yet born.
Oh my gosh.
So any sympathy for someone calling themselves neo-Nazi, white supremacist, this, that, and the other thing. What will Trump pay the price for his remarks? Ultimately, will this be his downfall? Because they were so hurtful on so many different levels. It was not only the self-image of the country. You got Eurotrash laughing at us. They're laughing at us now, how times have changed. You have the backlash of anti-Semitism that goes on. He's so hurtful. Will the Charlottesville remarks be his downfall? In your opinion, we really don't know, but I'm curious. Play Nostradamus for a second.
Well, as immediately following his remarks, people have been resigning. I forget what this person's title was, but he was some sort of maybe science secretary. He resigned. There were other people who were pulling out, like on his, I think it was like a business advisory board, but businesses were pulling out of working with him. And also, people are still, hold galas at his estate at Mar-a-Lago. And, what I was reading about recently is that he's lost millions of dollars in rental fees. A lot of nonprofits hold their annual galas there. I think the American Cancer Society was one of them. And so they've decided to no longer have their events there. And so that's translated to millions of dollars. And so while I don't think that this exactly is going to be his downfall, I think that the most recent poll I saw was that I think it was 25% of Trump supporters said there is absolutely nothing he could do to make them stop supporting President Trump. So that's quite scary to hear, that there is nothing this man could do that would make them lose faith in him. So while I don't think this exact event will be the downfall, it could be another event. It's going to be the snowball effect. But I mean, it does tell you a lot.
Statement that it means nothing. If you say nothing, it's like, how could you say nothing? That's craziness right there. That shows you.
Yes.
And here's another scary thing. The Democrats made it possible with Wasserman Schultz. Was it Sally Wasserman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz?
Debbie Wasserman Schultz, yes.
I mean, she herself never was punished for what she did, and the party threw out a woman to compete with him who just simply had a lot of baggage. It was just pure and simple. And, in hindsight, you look back and say, you can't fight Republicans with Democrats because it's all one big system, and they play good cop, bad cop every 4 years, and it changes. And the system itself needs changing.
Absolutely.
Three-party system, different way of going about it. They're questioning the votes themselves. Are they hacked by Russia? Or and they were doing this 2-3 elections in a row. What got me was those Chads. But right after that, it was in Ohio, I think it was, where the election booths were put together by a Republican supporter, and you couldn't go into the booth. You couldn't check it out. It had a copyright. You couldn't go into the machine. We're being manipulated by big business combined with organized religion and government. And they're just killing the little person. They're killing middle class. Reagan started it by killing the union, the air controllers union. We're messed up in a way that's horrible. What can I say? Give me a ray of hope. It's Shabbos. It's Friday night. On the 25th of August. Give me something to calm me down a little bit. Boy, I get
easily. Oh, that's easy to do. The ray of hope is that while these Nazis have been emboldened to come out of the shadows, it's not that they're new. It's not that they've been around. They just have been scared. And what is completely inspiring is that, you have a generation of people. I'm what you guess would call a millennial. I'm 35. And, we get this bad rap for always being on our cell phones, on social media. But as you can see with the Women's March and now with the rally tomorrow, people are mobilizing. Like we are on our phones and on our computers, but we're using that to organize and mobilize, and we are making Nazis afraid again. And so that is a huge ray of hope. You have tons of people who had no idea who their city supervisor is, who their senator is, who their representative is. Now, not only do these people know who they are, but they have their numbers stored in their phones and are making calls to their representatives and making their voices heard. You have people who have never been to any sort of protest or rally or city hall meeting are now participating. They're taking an active role in their government. And so I'm actually, as weird as this sounds, so grateful for Donald Trump, because I think if Hillary would have won, we would have remained complacent and we would have remained feeling powerless. But now you have an entire nation of people who are picking up their phones and making phone calls and writing letters, and more importantly, they're hearing back from people. I recently led a workshop for a women's group on how to get more involved, how basically it was kind of like activism 101. And I was talking to these women and they were so surprised. They're like, oh my gosh, I did. I called the mayor's office and they answered my call and I talked to a human being and I had a great conversation. And so they're finding out that their government is actually accessible to them and that they are listening and they are willing to have a conversation. And while, yes, you may call the mayor's office and you might not get the mayor, but you'll get an aide, you'll get an assistant, you'll get a clerk, but you will get somebody who, who talks directly to the mayor or whoever. And so I feel that you have a nation of people that's feeling actually very empowered and excited and supportive. When I talked to my mom this week and told her I was, going down to this protest and helping to organize, she did not say don't go. She just said, yeah, be careful. And that was it. She wasn't like, oh no, don't go, it's dangerous. She understands that mission. And so you have all of these generations of people understanding that this is important, where maybe back in the 60s, when my mom was growing up, 60s and 70s, maybe the parents weren't supportive of their kids going out in the streets and protesting and like, oh, why are you doing this? You're shaking everything up. And now you have these parents who are like, yeah, go get them. Good luck. Be safe. So Ralph, I am completely hopeful, very positive, and very, very encouraged. And I hope that you will be too.
Oh, man, you did cheer me up just by the way you said that, because you have a future in politics. You know it. What's your next step?
Well, I get that a lot. About every couple weeks, somebody tells me that. Well, my next step is to run East Bay Canna Community to the best of my ability, to be of maximum service to our community, to expand our reach of those we serve. I want to expand our reach to veterans and newly released prison inmates. Those are people who really, really need some help. And definitely with the veterans, to me, that's sacred reciprocity. It's not us like, oh, you poor vets, let's help you out. It's, wow, you guys really help this out. It's our turn. Like, please do us the honor of letting us serve you now. And moving on to education, educating even teenagers about cannabis, educate the real risks of cannabis, not the made up cannabis will kill you risks, and educating people about safely medicating with cannabis. You talk to any activist and they will say that they're an educator, not an activist. And that's how we've come as far as we have with cannabis legalization, is because people went out and educated people. It wasn't necessarily about holding up signs and yelling at City Hall. It was about educating our neighbors, our family members. And so at East Bay Canna, I plan to carry on that strong tradition of education. So that's my next step.
Joanna, can you speak to city's government's role in licensing and permitting these companies to do business with cannabis? Does Oakland take an outrageous part of a business? If I wanted to form a legal business in Oakland, would, in essence, the city become a partner, thereby decreasing the amount of money a business has to spend to give a living wage to the workers?
Mm-hmm.
And has that?
Yeah, so actually, I forget, maybe this was about a year ago. I can't remember. Maybe it's about a year ago, maybe a little bit less. The city of Oakland did try to pass some sort of law that for every cannabis business, whether that be a dispensary or a product line, that they were going to have to give the city of Oakland a seat on their board and 25% of their profits. So because marijuana activists are active activists, we packed City Hall, we let our voices be heard, and the city decided not to go ahead with that ordinance because they realized that I think was actually illegal to require the city to have, to let the city have a stake in your business, and to take 25%.
Yeah, one would think that
of our profits.
Absolutely. And they'll make the same, see, it's becoming a big business thing already. The big business owners will make the same amount of profit. The people affected are the workers who already had a failed attempt at unionizing through the Dan Rush situation. Can you touch on that, or you want to save that for another show?
I can't speak to that as much about the unions and the Dan Rush situation, but what I can speak to is that I think there is I know there is a myth that people think that any cannabis company is just rolling in cash. And that is definitely not true. You absolutely have companies who are very, very successful. They're selling millions of dollars of products, but a lot of these companies, their overhead is sky high. Their profits aren't as large as you think that they would be. And so, a lot of these companies are just barely making it. And then to have the city say, we want 25% of your profits, that would put a significant amount of businesses out of business. And not only that, but if that is Oakland, if Oakland is making that ordinance, then nobody's going to want to set up shop in Oakland. And Oakland is then going to miss out on all of the profits that could potentially bring us honestly, maybe billions of dollars in tax revenue. So the city made the right decision when they decided not to go through with that ordinance. But to me, it just seems so wrong that it was actually, it's the government who has perpetrated the war on drugs. And what they wanted to do through this ordinance was make businesses right the wrongs of the government that the government had put us through with the war on drugs. And so they were supposedly going to be using that money for equity programs, which I understand, but I just don't see that it's businesses' responsibility to right the wrongs of the government. That's the government should be righting its own wrongs. So Oakland got it right, but
vice versa, I might add. Because big business vis-a-vis the bankers were helped by government. It's not the government.
Absolutely.
So that's why I say big business, government, and organized religion combine for the unholy trinity, and we the people suffer. So that's,
we do.
That's what I'm trying to fight here on Flying High Over the Zone, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. This has been a terrific show getting to know you. I hope you'll come back and keep me posted on what's going down with all of this from time to time. Joanna Arenstein.
Thank you so much. I'll be happy to be a guest on your show anytime. I love talking about the things that I am most passionate about, and I'm happy to have you as a friend too, Ralph, and look forward to being on future shows. So thank you so much.
Be kind enough to tell the folk where they can reach you, if you have a website, if you have an email, if you're on Facebook. Give us the lowdown.
Sure. So to find out about the work I do with East Bay Canna Community, you can find our Facebook group, which is East Bay Canna Community. Just type that into Facebook. You will quickly find me, Joanna, because I am posting every several days, posting an event or sharing information. If you're interested in coming down to the rally tomorrow at Alamo Square, if you're interested in being nonviolent and respectful, you can find our Facebook page. It's the Nonviolent Resistance to Fascism. So just type that in. It's powered by SF Queer Resistance, which is that is connected to the San Francisco Harvey Milk LGBT Democratic Club. So either go to East Bay Canna Community, join us. It is a private group, so we will approve you for membership. So find us there, and then hopefully we'll see you tomorrow, the 26th. Tomorrow is Saturday. I don't know when this
at Alamo Square.
Program airs. At Alamo Square. And Alamo Square in San Francisco.
Beautiful. And let's hope that you can get to the mayor and get to the point where nobody's carrying guns.
We are. We know it's after hours. We've been working with people who might be able to reach him after hours. I'm sure that even though it's after business hours, he's still watching this closely, and I hope he makes the right decision. I know in my conversations with the mayor's office and the police, they've stated time and time again that their number one priority is safety for the citizens, and I'm going to trust that they will take that seriously and they'll do their best to keep us safe.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question. If you had a problem, would you rather call a hippie or a cop?
Well, the fact that I have to even pause. It depends. I guess it depends on the problem, but the fact that I had to pause shows the faith I have in our.
I'm not going to come over and shoot your dog.
It depends. Yeah, that's true. And I have a lot of family members who are in law enforcement, and I love and respect and honor them. There are a lot of good cops out there who are out there for the right reasons. I'm very proud of them and what they're doing. They're putting their lives on the line for us. But it's important for the cops who are doing the right thing to also stand up when they see cops who aren't doing the right thing and be the most vocal.
Well, you hit on something. Good cops, in quote, and good priests are all enablers on one level or another.
Yeah.
So both institutions are so incredibly, irreparably flawed. The police.
Well, they're human. They're human. They're human institutions. They're made up of humans, and humans are flawed.
Right. But you know what? What flaws it most is the aptitude test at the beginning. When you take an aptitude test, and if you want to pass it, you better tell them that you will go along to get along on some way. That good is good and bad is bad, and there's no gray. You better show them that, or you won't get a job. And people who think along those lines really have problems in life because there are extenuating circumstances. Nothing is clear-cut in life. And so if you change the aptitude, you'll change the what you get in police officers. If you simply liquidate the mother church, you'll be able to feed the hungry, educate the curious, and have enough money to throw rubbers to Africa to stop AIDS. And we solve all the world problems by just those two things, or at least a lot of them.
We could try. We could definitely try.
We'll try. You're a pleasure. Thank you for letting me rant a little bit.
Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely.
Okay, and again, you'll come back, I hope. I'll end this segment the way I end most of them. I implore you and everybody out there to keep your humor dry, keep your dreams wet, keep your kids out of let's just say military recruiting offices and grandkids too. And keep your kids off the laps of clerics that wear dresses. That's a good idea. If you do that, you do any of those four things, especially all four of those things, life will be much better. But I'm just a rambling old guy. I could be wrong. I invite criticism of that. But until next time, Joanna, I hope you're still laughing.
I am. Thank you. But I do have to give a plug. Not all priests are bad. I actually have a priest in my family who is a wonderful man, and he really embodies a modern priest and has grown his congregation, and I'm very proud of him.
That's very nice. I wish him the best, and if he's one of the good ones, I'll tell you,
he is one of the great ones.
My friend Sherry has an aunt who's a nun, and she's a wonderful person as well. So it's the upper hierarchy of the organization that's somewhat flawed, and yes, So his lap notwithstanding to my silly remark. How about that?
Yes. He's a great man. He really is. So, well, Ralph, thank you so much. I look forward to future talks with you. Thank you.
Beautiful. Everybody out there, keep on keeping on. I'll be back soon. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I am back, and you are flying high with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California, down by the lagoon. We're right across the bay from San Francisco, in the northern part of the greatest state of the country, in my not-so-humble opinion, I might add. And it's Friday, the 25th of August, and it's kind of a significant day in California history, the eve of a demonstration following up Charlottesville in North Carolina when the president made all those remarks about the demonstrators having good folks on both sides, this, that, and the other thing. He really kind of put his foot in it, and now they're following up with another demonstration, not the first of the week. We had one in Boston earlier on. I asked my good buddy, Brother Scott, who's a longtime friend of the show, to come into the studio today and kind of make heads or tails of what's going to happen tomorrow. Why is it the city or any municipality permits demonstrators who are just violent? There's no way to describe it in any way. Violent in their words and their deeds and their wishes and their hopes to destroy this country, the fiber that this country is built on. But they are entitled to free speech, the benefit of free speech. Where is the line blurred, Scott? Brother Scott.
Between free speech and what's going on tomorrow at Chrissy Field in San Francisco? As Ralph said, following the events in Charlottesville, Virginia, where that horrible tragedy occurred, these guys are sprouting up everywhere like mushrooms now. The neo-Nazis, the KKK, the white nationalists, and their ilk. And where they go, bloodshed follows. I mean, they're not here to debate. This isn't a parlor debating society we're talking about. They are here to recruit. They are here to raise their profile. They are here to become more notorious. But they're also here to do violence intentionally, specifically, explicitly, and the track record's clear. Where they go, people get hurt by them. And Charlottesville's only the most recent example. It goes all the way back to lynchings with the KKK, but it continues up to the present. And we still hear about it in the news far too often. And they'll show up tomorrow, along with a group that's calling itself Patriot Prayer Group or something very close to that. So you'll have overt neo-Nazi nationalists, perhaps, and other self-described groups occupying the far right wing of the political spectrum in this country showing up, and they need to be welcomed by a committee that exceeds their number exponentially, like what happened in Boston, when a few dozen or a few hundred maybe fascistic types were confronted by no less than 15,000, and some reports are as high as 40,000 people telling them this is not a good day for a parade. And so if they parade at all, it's under tight police protection and in the name of free speech. the police protect the terrorists and pilot them into the arena and then out again as quickly as possible, trying to minimize whatever damages they could reasonably expect to suffer, considering who they are and how they talk and all their bluster. And tomorrow they're coming evidently with weapons too, unless somebody at the last minute invokes some power to take their weapons away, or they voluntarily agree to give their weapons up. They're coming full out macho men, jungle camo outfits, and funny gloves with no fingertips and the whole 9 yards. Dressed and loaded for bear. And these people owe their origin to the KKK. They're the bastard offspring of the KKK and the really original, the original white nationalist terrorists from the South. They sprung up after the Civil War in Pulaski, Tennessee. One of their founders was Nathan Bedford Forrest, a cavalry commander for the South, fighting on the side of the Confederacy. Prior to the war, he had been himself a slave auctioneer. So he derived his income from the slave trade. But he scored some notable successes as a cavalry commander for the South during the Civil War. And then he went on to help found the KKK in Pulaski, Tennessee after the war. And when asked by admirers probably how he accounted for his heralded successes during the Civil War, he said in his own laconic style, "We always tried to get there firstest with the mostest." And that's the tactics that drove the neo-Nazis and the fascists out of Boston just a few days ago. Their opponents got there firstest with the mostest. They got hoisted on their own petard. And that's a great strategy. Labor should lead the way. Labor's already racially integrated largely and organized to a certain extent and funded to a modest extent. They should lead the way. They furnish an example of the kind of human material that should be at the front of this struggle. And it has been. It actually has been in the past. The last time the Nazi types tried to parade around here was in 1984, and it was a bad day for a parade. They got to their civic center in San Francisco and turned tail and ran with their tails between their legs back under the rocks from which they had come.
Scott, terrific. Appreciate that. What do you predict is going to happen?
I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully it'll be something like what happened in Boston. They'll show up. Probably the cops will be told to form a phalanx and usher them onto the stage or arena, whatever, where they're scheduled to be. Get them on and off as quickly as they can. Suffer some verbal and minor physical abuse in the form of rotten eggs and tomatoes and whatever. Light skirmishes is probably all they'll confront, but who knows, you know?
Do you think President Trump will ever recover from the remarks that he made equating both sides being equal?
Who am I to say? I don't even know that it's hurt him that much. I think it shores up his base, and that's why he does it.
Well, I think just the opposite, Scott. I think he's losing support in the Republican Party.
That's not his base.
But it better be when it comes to the people who make the decision whether or not to impeach him on, and maybe you can help demystify that. They are talking about impeaching him because of his mental state.
Talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. Mitch McConnell and who's the Paul Ryan.
Guy from
Paul Ryan, all the establishment Republican types, whom Donald Trump's followers call rhinos, R-I-N-O, Republican in name only. To the teabaggers and those types, these guys are no better than Obama. In fact, they might even be Muslim and Kenyan themselves, or related to him by blood. I've heard it said. Anyway, they don't. That's not his base. That's not who he's playing to. Those people opposed him all the way to the White House and got on board at the last minute. And I'm sure Steve Bannon would agree. Those people are your fair weather friends. You don't need to worry about them. You need to shore up your base. And when you shore up your base, that's an impregnable fortress. Your popularity poll numbers might be in the mid-30s and look dismal to you. But people have survived on lower numbers than that. And we got important work to do.
I don't think there have been any lower numbers than that for any president in his first, say, 6 months, 7 months, whatever it is. There hasn't been a president who's taken more vacation time than Obama took in 8 years in his first 6 months. He's costing we the taxpayers, we the people, thousands of millions of dollars to protect him so he could play golf. But, that's all numbers, and there's print more money, and that's not the issue. It's small change. Exactly. What's really his harm is he is putting us in a position where Euro trash can laugh at us. Unbelievable. With good right, with all the right in the world, to put us in a position of being heckled in the world, our world position, and more importantly than that, it's the self-image of an American who wakes up every day going, how can it get worse? What can he say to alienate peaceful people? What can he say to instill hatred more than he's already said? How do you see this? How do you see him being carried out? In handcuffs or in a straitjacket?
I don't know. Remember Peter Sellers? They could sedate him. Just keep him properly medicated. But I don't know. That's craziness going on over there. That's a clown show, a scary clown show.
No Nostradamus in you to try to determine what's going to happen with all of this. You see Pence taking over, and if he takes over, is it going to be worse? Because Pence is a politician. He's much more to the right of Trump. Trump isn't really a right-winger per se. He's a nutcase. Pence has an ideology. I think he's much more dangerous. Do you see him taking over? Do you see him maybe being caught up in the Russian scandal, which is in hold? They called for a grand jury. Did you hear anything about that since the grand jury was called for, or is everything secretive from that point on? You have a legal background. Give me an idea what that entails when they call for a grand jury. And we're talking about looking into what went on in pre-election and post-election between the Russians and the Trump administration. So is everything going to be silenced because there was a grand jury, Brother Scott?
I don't think so. Grand juries evolved out of Old English law in feudal times. The jury was supposed to be ostensibly a safeguard against the arbitrary power of the despot who rules the fiefdom, whether he's a count, a baron, a duke, an earl, or what have you. They have absolute power. They can say, off with his head, and the head comes off. But the grand jury was imposed at some point, probably as a result of social struggle, and was supposed to serve as a buffer between that absolutely despotic power to throw you in a dungeon without charge until I feel like letting you out because I'm the, kingpin, to try to modulate that somewhat. And that's what it was when it was instituted here too, supposedly, and it probably functions that way sometimes. But it has it's been morphed, as many things are, in what I consider to be a commodity economy way, in a manner consistent with commodity economies that turn everything into merchandise, that incentivize and monetize everything. Grand juries now are boutique appointments, if you will. Some sterling citizens, ostensibly across sampling of citizens, is installed for a 6-month or 8-month or 9-month or 2-year term. I don't think it'll run that long. And then the prosecutor and the DA's office and so on can come right up to the grand jury and present evidence and say, we think we have enough to charge this person with a crime. Here's the crime we want to charge them with based on the evidence we just presented to you. Will you authorize us to file a criminal complaint against this person and seek his arrest? And remember, it started out as a way to rebuff the king's authority and say, no, we don't think you have enough. We know that guy. He's our neighbor. You leave him alone. And they function that way. But today, it's a rubber stamp, they say, for a prosecutor's office that wants to make sure he can indict somebody. So he gets some people on the same team as him to hear him present his PowerPoint presentation and then ask for an indictment and start issuing orders for documents and witnesses to come appear under oath or risk going to jail. It's been said, and it's probably pretty close to true, that the way things are now, any halfway decent prosecutor in front of a grand jury could indict a ham sandwich. So that's kind of the way that works. And I don't see where any kind of grand jury thing against Trump is going to go very far. I could be wrong. Something could pop up that we haven't seen yet. But the Russia thing, I've said before, and I'll say it again, is going to turn into what it always was: financial chicanery of the kind that every get-rich mercenary developer, real estate developer, and casino owner wants to do everywhere he goes to make a buck. Bend the rules in his favor, cut corners on environmental and worker safety regulations, pay as little as he possibly can, bribe a few people to get some things done if that's the way they do it in that neighborhood. That's what you'll find in Russia with Trump, and that's about it.
You'll find that he fired the head of the FBI, which only can mean obstruction of justice, according to a bunch of folks, prosecutors. They put prosecutors together to determine this. Now, the case is still going on. This isn't just a business deal. This is basically what they're going to indict him on is obstruction of justice. Can you address that? And can you once and for all address how he could fire the head of the FBI? He could. It's his right to, after he asked him to give up the case. After he asked him about Felix and those guys, how could he fire him? And at this point, how they didn't all come in there the next day and say, "Hey, we got to have you out of here." This is and it's taken months now. So
what's the question?
The question is, how can you justify Trump firing the head of the FBI, Comey? And is that not in itself obstruction of justice, Brother Scott. Hold it close.
Don't know, don't care. That's not what makes the world go round. He fired Comey. I've got no dog in that fight. I don't care. The FBI is the FBI. It's J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. The only reason J. Edgar Hoover didn't get fired, some people say, is because he had the goods on everybody that ever occupied the White House. And so they couldn't afford to fire him without having their own dirty underwear hung up for everybody to see. Now, I don't know if that's true. I kind of tend not to believe that. But it could be true. He was a police state despot. That's J. Edgar Hoover. And he fashioned the organization in his own image. James Comey has a very different persona. That's all I know. I know that the Democrats vilified him when it looked like he bungled it and caused Hillary to trip and fall and threw the election to the Republicans. And the Republicans glorified him, and the Democrats vilified him. And now they've changed shoes, and each one is wearing the other's shoes. So as between those guys, I don't know, I don't care. That's not even important.
It's not important to you whether or not the president covered his dealings up with Russia?
Well, that's an entirely different question. I mean, I'm going to be one of those people that's sniggering.
He was trying to get the FBI to cover it up.
Well, whatever. Hey, let's go back. This is a long-standing tradition that everybody commits this kind of offense. It's a long-standing tradition going back at least to Vietnam, and I'm sure farther than that. And I'll give you the examples in a second. It's been committed time and time and time again by president after president after president. Nobody went to jail for it. This guy might get himself in jail because he's a dangerous clown who's out of control. But that's the only reason it would get him in trouble. Because others, let's go back to the one I was thinking of at first. In Vietnam, when the Vietnam War era, when the Democrats were in office, and the war was very, very unpopular, and Johnson would end up abdicating and saying, I'm not going on with this. I can't do it. I'm not going to stand for re-election. I know everybody hates me for this. So I'm getting out. Well, the Republicans have been negotiating back channel with the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese, saying, wait until Dick Nixon gets in, because we have a plan. We'll be better for you. It'll be better than what Johnson can do. Johnson can't cave because he'll lose too much face. But we'll tell our people we have a secret plan to end the war, and as soon as we get in, it'll be better for you. And so
Reagan did the same thing.
And so did Reagan. That's right. With Carter. Carter was going to free the hostages in Iran. Reagan's emissaries went to Tehran and said, hold off just another month. Wait till the election's over.
Okay.
So they do that crap. It's standard operating procedure.
But they may do that with adversaries. They don't do that with Russia. We're not going. There's a big difference. Can you see that being a big difference?
Yeah, that's the cardinal sin. There's nothing worse than a Russian. It's a hangover from the Cold War when they taught us that there was nothing worse than a Soviet. And that's what led us to Afghanistan. The Soviets were there cleaning the clock of the Mujahideen, crushing them in the egg before they multiply. And then somebody got involved and gave the Mujahideen a big boost and created a Frankenstein's monster just because they wanted to taunt the Soviet Union on the specious theory that there's nothing worse than a communist, than a Soviet. Even these crazy Dark Ages, imam, mullah, clerics are better than a Soviet bureaucrat telling us what to do.
Because Soviets are anti-religion, and organized religion contributes to that. here. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct. Zbigniew Brzezinski. This is even before Reagan. This is under Carter, a Democrat in the late 70s. Zbigniew Brzezinski was Carter's main man that was the architect of this Afghan policy. You'll recall that Jimmy Carter launched what he called the Human Rights Crusade, targeting the Soviet Union, boycotting the Moscow Olympics. Nobody could buy one of those cute, cuddly teddy bears that was the logo for the Moscow Olympics. And they set a trap, according to Zbigniew Brzezinski. It set a trap for the Russian bear, or the Soviet bear, and he stepped into it. And it was done deliberately. And they used holy warriors, self-styled mujahideen, the Northern Alliance, the so-called Northern Alliance. They funneled the money. They helped them build those tunnels where Osama was. Osama was on their payroll, was wearing an American Army uniform. I'm not kidding. They gave birth to this devil's spawn and funded him. Otherwise, they would have been bombed into oblivion by those Soviet attack helicopters. And they gave the Mujahideen defensive weaponry that would make it easier to escape from those helicopters. Shoulder-fired missiles and things like that could knock them out of the sky. Point is, they wanted to make it so expensive for the Soviet Union and its client regime in Kabul to stay in power that they would give it up. And that's what happened. And they got what they wished for. But be careful what you wish for. Sometimes you get it. And they created a Frankenstein's monster that haunts us all today because they said there's nothing worse than a Soviet or a communist. Allah Akbar!
What are the Soviets doing to keep that notion going nowadays? Can't be all our perception of them. How are they coming at us economically, which is basically what this is all about?
You asked me about how the Soviets are doing it. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 and 1992. Today it's Russia. And most of its satellite provinces broke off and are their own independent countries now.
Right.
Russia. Well, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. I don't see them as a threat. I don't approve of the regime. I think the regime is corrupt, and I don't approve of its politics. I'd like to see it removed from power, but I don't want to see Uncle Sam sticking his nose in there. He's already demonstrated he picks the worst people to represent his alliance, like the Saudi royals. You can't point to Putin and not say anything about the Saudi royals, one of the main allies, a mainstay of American foreign policy in the Middle East. They are the darkest regime on earth. You see the way those women have to wear those burqas all the way down to the ground?
Right.
And can't vote, can't even drive a car?
Right, they're treated like chattel.
At least in the Muslim republics of the old Soviet Union, a Muslim woman could go to college and get a civil engineering degree. She still had to hide her lipstick from her grandparents because they didn't approve. But she could get a doctorate. She didn't have to wear no burqa. There were those that did wear burqas, but there was no law that said you got to wear a burqa, and there's no religious police chasing you around and flogging you if you're caught showing an ankle. And those are gross stereotypes for a lot of people, but it's an exaggeration to underscore the point.
Right. All right, Scott, I got to ask you, you've been out of Alameda for about a year. How's Rockland? How's the weather these days? Got to make you smile.
Bacon like a potato. Lots of bacon up there, but it's B-A-K-I-N-G. Bacon like a potato.
We miss you here in Alameda. What do you miss most about Alameda? Callie and I notwithstanding, and Ray, and you have so many friends that miss you, and Paul, my God, for Paul to get any more intellectual stimulation than you provided is very difficult for all of us, really. What do you miss the most about living in Alameda?
All that stuff you just said. Camaraderie. Next to the weather, it's the next best thing.
Okay. And our walks. I miss our walks, Scott. Thanks for dropping by. Thanks for dropping by the 420 studio. We will see you very shortly. And to those of you out there, I implore you all to keep your humor dry, keep your, that's enough today. I'll just say it. Keep your humor dry. Adios, everybody.